Alright, yo, what's up guys? It's me, Shadow, back again with another tutorial video. This week, we're going to be going over how to make IZAYA TIJI and Wi-Fi type beats. If you guys don't already know, Wi-Fi is sort of like the most iconic producer for IZAYA TIJI, who is the artist we're covering in today's video. I'm definitely very excited to do this video because this is a super different style for me. I don't usually make these beats like at all, and I feel like I actually did pretty good on this tutorial. I don't feel like I ever do super bad on my tutorials, but I do feel like sometimes I don't really like hit the mark of like where we're trying to go with the video. But I feel like I did very good in this video, so hopefully you guys agree with me. And yeah, I guess without further ado, this video. Anyways guys, starting off, we're gonna set the BPM to 135. I think anywhere from 130 to 145 is a solid range for these beats. If you push it any farther, it might sound a little weird, a little bit fast and different. If you want to experiment and go higher than that, that's totally up to you. I definitely encourage everyone to experiment. But for these kinds of beats, I guess typically you'd be in the 130 to 145 range. These are the drums that we're going to be using for this video. Pretty simple stuff. Basically just some like plug drums. I know these are not plug beats by any means. Those are kind of the drums that you're going to want to be using anyways. You can find these sounds either in my Twizzy Stash kit or my Valentine's Plug and B Essentials kit. There's a free demo for both of those, so go check that out in the link in the description. For melodies, guys, we're going to be using Serum and Expand 2. Typically, I wouldn't recommend something like Expand for this. I would recommend something like Nexus, maybe Hive, Electra X, something like that, with a lot of very like open, airy synths and stuff like that, because you want to make ambient melodies for these beats. But I don't have those plugins, so I just went with Serum, and I used a collection of different banks. But pretty much you just want to look out for like ambient airy pads in whatever VST you choose to use. The first sound that I'm using is this isolation pad. It's going to sound like this. Then we're going to use this Opus bell. I think the best serum banks that you can really have for these sort of sounds is the Shinju Serum Banks. If you guys are not familiar with Shinju, he is a super talented sound designer and producer, all that kind of stuff. Anytime I go for any of these ambient beats, his serum banks are always my go-tos. I don't even use my own because I just know that he has like the best of the best when it comes to this sort of sound. So yeah, definitely check his banks out. I think he has like 4 out right now, and they're all super good. So that is what I recommend if you're going to be using Serum. The last sound that we're using is the wide and bright strings from Expand 2. I'm going to be honest, I don't use Expand 2 like a ton, so I'm not familiar with every single preset within the plugin, but I'm relatively sure that you guys can get away with just using Expand 2 for these kinds of beats. I'm sure they have plenty of super good pads. I just enjoy Serum, so that's what I use personally. But yeah, guys, that is actually the presets and drums out of the way. Now we're going to hop into how I made this beat, starting off with the melodies. So first off, guys, I just laid this little chord progression out. That's pretty simple. It's going to sound like this. And honestly, the way I did this was super simple. Basically, if I select all of this and pitch it down 2 semitones, you guys will see it sort of lines up with the scale. I basically used a C# minor melodic scale. Typically, I don't actually do the whole scale highlighting thing. I don't know why I don't do that, because it's like a super helpful tool, and like pretty much everyone recommends it in videos. But for some reason, I just don't usually do that, because I guess I just create melodies in my head without scales in mind. But essentially, guys, if you want an easy way to make chords like I just did here, you're going to click this little drop down arrow. You're going to go to helpers, scaling grid, and then from that point you can select whatever scale you want. I don't think there's a particular scale in mind that's going to work best for these beats. I do feel like minor scales would work better, but in terms of like C, C#, D, E, F, whatever, I think you can kind of do whatever you want. And from that point on, truthfully, I just randomly clicked in notes. Every note that's lighter is in the scale, and every note that's darker, I believe, is not. But basically, to make this chord progression, all I did was just click notes in very randomly within the, highlighted scale. And that might sound very strange for a tutorial maker to do, because usually tutorial makers know what they're doing. Yeah, I don't. I just laid out random chord progressions, clicked in random notes. I made sure to utilize some notes that were super close together, some notes that were super far apart, and you know, anything in between. But for the most part, guys, just click things in super randomly within your scale. Make some cool sounding chords that are like ambient and weird. Typically, when you're making chords with like super ambient pads, the preset itself is usually going to carry. You know, if I play this with like a super harsh synth or something like that, it probably will not sound as good. But regardless, this is the chord pattern that I laid out for the beat. Mixing wise, all I did was I made this sound stereo. Typically, I would add some effects for ambient beats, and I did in other parts, but as you can see here, I tried experimenting with like a variety of different effects, and you know, they just weren't really hitting for the video, so I decided to just leave this as is because it was a super good preset. Then guys, we were going to copy what we already had and just put it into another preset and pitch it up an octave, and it's going to sound like this. We're going to make this sound stereo as well, and we're going to turn the volume down. We want most of our melody sounds to be stereo because pretty much everything in this beat is going to be very like panned and stereo. We're going to put like some default reverb. I did change the L cut and size, but other than that, I think it's like pretty default. I'm going to add some fruity delay with this time setting, and it's going to be turned down to like 7%, so you barely hear it. I'm also going to be using a destructor with a bit crusher preset. That's basically going to make the sound more crunchy and less I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I know that bit crushing is super good for like high-end melodies because it makes them kind of less harsh, but also more harsh at the same time. It's super hard to explain, but I will say bit crushing is just a good thing to do in your beats in general. Sounds super cool. I like doing it. Yeah. Then we are EQing out all the low end. There was hardly any low end to begin with, but I'm just getting rid of it all. And then guys, we were using a shaper box with the panning preset. We're changing the length to 1 bar, and that's pretty much all the alterations that we have going on here. I've been using shaper box in a lot of my videos, and mostly it's for this panning preset. If you guys don't have shaper box, that's totally fine. Cable Guys has a plugin called Pancake, and it basically is just shaper box. The panning preset, it's probably a little bit different. It probably doesn't have as much like I don't know, variety or like as many things that you can do. However, you don't need shaper box. You can just get Pancake. It's free. But yeah, I just use this because I want to use a lot of panning in this beat because that is always utilized in like an IZAYA TIJI type beat or like in Wi-Fi's beats. Then guys, lastly, we have this weird plucky pattern that I don't really like that much, honestly, but I put it in the beat anyways, and it's going to sound like this. Basically, guys, to do this, I just click the magnet and I switch this to a third step. As you can see, this sort of makes more sense. And from that point, I just did a D sharp, G sharp, F sharp. These were basically notes that were already existent in the chord progressions, and I just made like a super simple repetitive counter melody, lead, whatever you want to call it. We're going to make this sound stereo as well. We're going to turn it down a little bit. Fruity reverb, just turn the size up. Fruity delay, 3 again, turning this down to 17%. And then a fruity love filter. We're using the LP to HP with panning preset. It's just super good to make your sounds pan in a weird, cool effect. That's about it. Altogether, guys, this is what our melody is going to sound like. Pretty cool. I'm very satisfied with this because ambient melodies are not my thing. I'm pretty much never making them, but I feel like this did come out ambient, I guess. That's the whole point. So yeah, it worked, I think. If you guys disagree, my bad. But that is the melody out of the way. Now we're going to hop into how I made the drums. Starting off, guys, we have the clap pattern, which is going to sound like this. Super simple, but we did do a little bit of like mixing tricks and stuff like that. First thing I did is I pitched it up a bit. Normally it would play in a C, but I played it in a D. We are also using the melodic band pass preset on this in Fruity Love Filter yet again. I don't know the exact presets that Wi-Fi uses on his drums, but you guys know if you've heard his beats that he has a very distinct sound, very distinct like preset that he uses on a lot of his drums, and the closest I could get to replicating that was just using Fruity Love Filter on pretty much all the drums in this beat. So yeah, that's what the clap is going to be like. Then guys, we have the hi-hats, which are going to sound like this. This is obviously a super strange bounce, but That's it. I don't really know where I was going there. It's a very weird bounce, and that's what you want to do intentionally with these beats. This hi-hat pattern has a super weird bounce, and that's what you kind of want to do for these beats. You can do it like a normal hi-hat pattern if you want, but I chose not to. The way that I like to explain this, guys, is essentially if you had just this little like 1/4 of a bar playing the hi-hat in like a fourth interval or whatever. I can't like verbally explain this very well, but imagine your hi-hats are playing like this. Now you're going to take it and you're going to remove the middle 2 notes and just keep the end 2 notes, and essentially that is the core of this hi-hat pattern. It's a very strange bounce, but it's pretty iconic to Wi-Fi type beats. And then, you know, on top of what we already laid out, I basically just added some low octave notes with low velocity, and then this little weird like random note thing that went up in velocity. Basically just right clicked and created a little stare effect like that. Effect-wise, fruity reverb, turn the sound all the way up. No, turn the size up. Turn it down to 71% in the mix. Fruity delay 3, the default presets, and turn it down to 6%. A shaper box with the panning preset again. We're going to turn that down to 66%. And then in Fruity Love Filter, we're going to use the high-low double pattern preset. We're going to turn that down to 18% in the mix. All of those effects together are going to make the hi-hats sound super like wide and ambient like we did in this beat. Then guys, we have the snare pattern that's going to sound like this. Yeah, this is a weird one, kind of hard to explain, but I did keep the metronome on so you can guys... Okay, can't talk right now, dude. So you guys can kind of hear like how these snares play in relation to the BPM. Essentially what I did, guys, is I played around with panning. When I record with OBS, it doesn't record panning, so that's my bad. Basically, the higher notes in this pattern are going to pan to the left ear. The lower notes are going to pan to the right ear. Essentially, you want to really play around with panning with pretty much every drum sound that you have. We're going to be using the LP into HP with panning preset again within Fruity Love Filter. We're going to make these drums stereo. We're going to put a fruity reverb on with just increased size. Lower it down to 21%, and then again, fruity delay, default presets, turn it down to 4%. Essentially, guys, if you haven't caught on already, Fruity Love Filter is your friend when you're making these Wi-Fi type beats, because that's sort of the closest I could replicate to the iconic effects that he puts on his drums. Then, guys, we have the 808 pattern, which is going to sound like this. So this sounds super weird, very strange bounce, which was done intentionally, and essentially I'm just using the A# 3, which is like the lowest possible note I could use in this progression without, you know, the 808 sounding super muddy and bad. And from that point, you know, the start of the progression, we're starting off on an A# 4 that's going to slide down to an A# 3. Slide notes are very common in like Wi-Fi beats, IZAYA TIJI beats, and from that point we're just purposely doing like very strange bounce. Right after the slide note, we have the 808 playing basically twice in a row, very jarring bounce. We have lots of gaps in the pattern. We have, you know, different notes that would play basically within the chord progression that we made. You know, these are all notes that would fit within the progression that we made. Also, I intentionally left the 808 out on the 5 here. You know, there's like the 1, 3, 5. Normally 808s always play on the 1, the 3, the 5. Those are like places that 808s pretty much always play, but I purposely did not make it play on the 5 because I wanted to throw the listener's ear off a bit. You know, from that point, just clicking 808s in kind of randomly, honestly, just to make like a super weird, cool bounce. And then the last thing I did was I utilized different octaves. I used an A# 5 and an A# 4. I turned the velocity a bit down, and as you can see in the panning, I panned one to the left ear and one to the right. You guys can't hear that in the recording, but it basically just creates a cool like sub effect. Could this pattern have been a little bit better? Possibly. I feel like maybe I could have picked a better 808 or done it in like a higher octave so the 808 didn't sound muddy. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with the way this came out. So that is 808 pattern number 1. Then, guys, we have 808 pattern number 2, which is exactly the same. It's just the Chase the Money 808. Only change in this pattern is that I didn't have the first A# 5 slide down, but other than that, yeah, completely the same. That is the drums out of the way, guys. I'm not going to play the drums on their own because I feel like the 808 on its own doesn't sound great. But yeah, those are the drums out of the way. Now we're going to go over structuring real quick, and then we're going to wrap this video up. I did forget to mention for the Chase the Money 808, I actually took some low end out, which is pretty weird. I made it stereo, and I used a Destructor Bit Crusher preset. I just wanted the Chase the Money 808 to sound super thin and kind of like weird and jarring. Basically, it's going to play for the verse, so you can kind of, you know, hook big 808, verse small 808, you know, simple simple patterns and stuff like that. For structuring, guys, basically it's gonna be 16 bars of hook, 16 bars of verse, and yeah, the beat's basically just gonna repeat from there. There's no bridge, there's nothing crazy like that. For the hook, basically, it's going to be all the primary sounds playing for the first half, and then we're going to introduce the snare. We're going to bring in that weird pluck sound and the violins, pattern, whatever you want to call that. That's going to come in for the second half to keep the hook moving. Then we're going to drop out to the verse, which is going to follow a similar structure, but we're going to switch out to the Chase the Money 808. The thinner, like less intense 808 is sort of symbolizing like we're moving to a different part of the beat. It's the verse now. The snare is going to come in for the second half again, but we're not going to bring in the violins or the pluck because we want this verse to be simple. Then we have hook 2, then we have verse 2, and then we have hook 3, but it's basically going to act as an outro where I mess around with like EQ automation and stuff like that to make the beat kind of end off like this. So yeah, structuring wise, nothing too crazy. I feel like you could do more with an IZAYA TIJI type beat, a Wi-Fi type beat, but I personally didn't. I just did hook verse because I don't know, I feel like the beat kind of spoke for itself. It didn't need like any crazy structuring. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you watched the video all the way through the end, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you guys who watch my videos all the way through to the end. If you guys like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, don't. Remember to hit the subscribe button. I post videos 2 times a week on Wednesday and Friday covering underground and up-and-coming artists, challenge videos, entertainment content, and more. And yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good day or night. Peace.